This question is worth 11 marks. You have made a custard tart using the recipe below. The tart has many faults. The pastry had an undercooked taste. There was shrinkage in the pastry. The pastry was tough and the filling was lumpy and did not set. The ingredients consist of 200 grams of strong plain flour, 100 grams of fat and 50 ml of water. My thoughts here are that short crust pastry commonly has a ratio of half fat to the amount of flour, so this is fine. However, strong flour isn't a good choice for a tart as it contains gluten proteins, so it would give a chewy texture to the pastry due to the gluten formation. And also, it hasn't specified which type of fat. If a low-fat product is used, the pastry won't have the desired texture and be crumbly. The filling consists of 700 ml of milk, 1 egg yolk and 90 grams of caster sugar. My thoughts here are that only 1 egg to 700 ml of milk is not enough. There should be at least 2 eggs. Alternatively, you could decrease the amount of milk used to allow coagulation to occur. So the method involves rubbing the fat into the flour, add the water, stir to form a dough and knead for 2 minutes. Roll out the pastry and line the dish with the pastry. So my thoughts here are, why do I have to knead and for so long? As this may result in overhandling and so the pastry may become tough. Also, I should be blind baking the pastry to avoid a soggy bottom. Ideally, I should use a chilled fat that is good for pastry making, such as lard, butter or vegetable shortening. So the method involves boiling milk, beat the egg yolk and sugar together until pale and creamy, pour the boiling milk onto the egg yolk mixture, fill the tart to the top of the pastry with the egg mixture and bake at 140 degrees Celsius for 25 minutes. So I think here, why would you boil the milk when the hot milk is added to the egg mixture? Rather like scrambling eggs, it will cause it to curdle and become lumpy. 140 degrees Celsius as well is too low for a tart, so this may well result in soggy pastry and uncooked filling. If the oven is too cool, then the fat will melt before the starch gelatinizes, and so the fat will run out instead of being absorbed. So we've analysed the ingredients and method, and it asks, why did these faults happen, the reasons they happened, and explain how you could prevent the faults, resulting in a better custard tart. Remember, this is worth 11 marks. So the first statement here is the pastry had an undercooked taste. So the reasons could be that the pastry was not blind baked, so to prevent it, blind bake the pastry. The pastry was too thick, so make sure you roll it out to the correct thickness. The pastry was not cooked for long enough, so you may need to look at timings and also temperature as well. And don't forget to use a metal tin to conduct heat better. Now remember that many of the faults with something like a tart is due to the oven temperature being too hot or cool. Also, cooking time is too short or the dish has been overcooked. There was shrinkage in the pastry, so reasons for this include that the fat and water were not chilled beforehand, the wrong type of fat was used, maybe a low fat spread. The pastry wasn't rested before rolling to help relax the gluten. The pastry was stretched when lining the dish, and an incorrect oven temperature. And also remember the ratio of fat to flour. There's half of the fat to flour ratio. So it's important to prevent these things to weigh ingredients carefully, use chilled ingredients, use the correct type of fat, rest the pastry in the fridge before rolling out to help relax the gluten. Line the dish without stretching. If it's not quite even around the pan, it's tempting to use your fingertips to make it nice and even and to press the pastry. But if you make it quite thin, it will shrink back as it's cooking. And also check that the oven is at the correct temperature. So the reasons why the pastry was tough include the wrong flour used, the wrong type of fat was used, the fat wasn't chilled, and there wasn't the correct ratio, the correct amount of fat to flour. The rubbing in of the fat was carried out incorrectly. Maybe too much water was added. Pastry was kneaded for too long, or maybe the pastry was overhandled. So to prevent this, we use plain flour, not strong flour, as this contains too many proteins, too many gluten proteins. Use a white fat, such as lard or Trex, to make the pastry shorter and crumblier. Ensure the fat is at the correct temperature to maximize the plasticity of the fats and the shortening of the pastry. Remember to correctly weigh out the ingredients. When you rub in the fat into the flour, remember to use the tips of the fingers and lift high. This helps to add air into the mixture. Time the rubbing in if you're using a food processor, as if this is left on for a long time, the pastry will be over processed, allowing the gluten to develop. When you're adding water, add it gradually, a little bit at a time, so you don't end up adding too much. And do not knead the pastry as this develops the gluten. This will make the pastry tough and also maybe chewy. And aim to roll out the pastry just once, as overhandling will toughen the pastry. The filling was lumpy and did not set. So the reasons for this include that not enough egg was used, or maybe there was too much milk. So therefore there was the incorrect ratio of milk to egg. The milk was too hot and so coagulated the egg yolk, which caused lumps of egg to form. The milk was not whisked in. There was insufficient cooking time and the oven was too cool. So to prevent this, you can increase the amount of eggs or decrease the amount of milk. The custard didn't set or coagulate due to the incorrect ratios of egg to milk. Warm the milk, don't boil it to avoid the scrambled egg, to avoid overcoagulation. Whisk the warm milk into the egg gradually to avoid overheating the egg and causing coagulation and lumps to form. The tart was not left in the oven for long enough, and the oven temperature was too low to allow the coagulation of the egg to occur and therefore set the filling.